Let's talk for a moment again about the hospital projects you've been involved in. And what are some of the problems that they have faced, and what are the criteria? What were you able to do?
Well, the criteria when we go into sort of hospital projects are quite often the same. It's that appointments are being missed, that they're getting complaints about poor wayfinding. It's that hospital staff are being stressed out because they're constantly being asked for directions and they're not being allowed to go around their business and that sort of thing. What we find when we're speaking to hospitals is they really lack any overall knowledge or understanding of why they're going wrong. They really are sort of in the dark about it. And so what we tend to find as well is a lot of the problems are not unique to an individual hospital. They are there no matter what's happening. We could go into most of the hospitals in the UK and the same inherent problems are there. It's, as we mentioned earlier, signs that have been left there over periods of time.
I mean, you've clearly been successful at what you've done and been appreciated. You've done some work with civic centres, haven't you? Bolton, for example, that was a success for you. What, in simple terms, what happened there?
Right, we were involved in Bolton quite some time ago. It first started about 10 years ago, really. They were having a lot of problems. They had something like 27 different reception desks for various different functions around the civic centre, all operational. And of course there was a transfer of people from one desk to another, and there was paperwork heading and all that. It was an absolute nightmare as far as people getting lost and just logistics. So we advised them that really what they should be doing is centralising this into some form of one-stop shop. Of course, 10 years later, and a lot of sort of negotiation and council meetings and consultation later, this is what they decided to do. And I mean, although it was a success to begin with, they were still finding out there was lots of problems in the way that was actually facilitated.
So you analysed it, you went through the whole process of what you needed to do, and the outcome at the end, did it help the council? You were successful there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of missed appointments was reduced, and we actually reduced the volume of signs by 40%, and that had a massive knock-on effect, as you can imagine, with the cost side of things.
Somewhere like a civic centre, I suppose, relatively speaking, is simple, maybe not with 27 reception desks, but when you deal with an airport, where do you start? Where do you finish?
Well, it doesn't really matter where the environment is, whether it's an airport, whether it's a civic centre, whether it's a bus station or whatever, because essentially the people using it are still human beings. We're dealing with sort of human places, so it's the same factors apply. What you've got to be more aware about in a different environment, like for instance as an airport, is you're in competition with advertising and lots of other visual noise from retail outlets and that kind of thing. And it's really about positioning. It's about still putting that information in the place where people need it and making it visible.
But quite a challenge, I imagine, pulling together all the people who've got some kind of input in an airport, the retailers, the people who own the airport, the airlines and so on. Do they all need to have an input into what you're doing?
Well, they do, because, I mean, however small these insignificant factors may appear, they do have, because, I mean, it's all about how the building functions, and they're all interrelated. I mean, as far as gathering the information, we're there to help, so we don't often find that there's a great deal of problem. That where it is useful is knowing when to actually sort of involve people in groups for discussion and when to actually get the information, speak to them on a one-to-one basis.
So what is really, I suppose, the final key thought that we ought to bear in mind about this whole way of thinking?
Yes, that really wayfinding is quite a complex process, but it's also something that has to be done on the ground. It's not something that you can do from behind a desk. It involves a lot of time, it involves a lot of effort, it involves a lot of sort of negotiation, a lot of information gathering, and a lot of shoe leather, really, which is what some so-called wayfinders tend to not realise.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, there is certainly a great deal there to finding your way around buildings, more perhaps than we had first imagined. My thanks to Mike Pridding for coming in and sharing his not inconsiderable experience with us.